He was humiliated and removed from his seat. But it wasn't long before those who had caused him this embarrassment had to face an unexpected truth. What happened on this flight wouldn't just change the lives of the passengers on board, but the future of the entire airline. Ava Carter was walking down the airplane aisle with calm confidence. Her composed demeanor caught the attention of a few passengers, prompting them to glance in her direction. She wore a tailored blazer over an elegant dress that hugged her figure perfectly. Her natural curls framed her face beautifully. In one hand, she carried a leather laptop bag, and in the other, her boarding pass. As she moved through the aisle, her eyes scanned the seat numbers she passed. Ava's demeanor was composed and self-assured, but the quiet determination in her eyes revealed someone who wasn't easily shaken. Reaching her designated first-class seat, Ava offered a polite smile to the passenger beside her and placed her bag in the overhead compartment. She sat down, pulling out a small notebook and pen, and began jotting down notes. Her focus was entirely on her work, seemingly oblivious to the curious stares from those around her. A short while later, one of the flight attendants, Miranda Scott, was briskly moving through the cabin. Dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform, Miranda's sharp gaze assessed each passenger she passed. Her eyes landed on Ava, and she stopped in her tracks. Something about Ava caught her attention, though it wasn't immediately clear what it was. Miranda's expression hardened as she approached Ava's seat. "Excuse me," Miranda said in a polite but firm tone. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Ava looked up, surprised but calm, and handed over her boarding pass with a small, composed smile. "Of course." Miranda examined the ticket and frowned slightly. "Is this for first class?" "That's correct," Ava replied in a steady voice. "Yes." Miranda's brow furrowed as if trying to make sense of something in her mind. After a brief pause, she returned the boarding pass without a word and walked away. Her posture, however, indicated that the matter was far from resolved. Ava paid little attention to the exchange and returned to her notes, her pen moving steadily across the page. Meanwhile, Miranda was speaking quietly with another flight attendant, glancing in Ava's direction with visible tension in her expression. From a distance, her unease was unmistakable. It wasn't long before Miranda returned, this time with a more authoritative air. "Miss Carter," Miranda said, crossing her arms, "could you step out of your seat for a moment? I need to verify something." Ava raised an eyebrow, surprised but unshaken. Taking her laptop bag, she followed Miranda toward the back of the cabin. The other first-class passengers exchanged curious whispers, their eyes following the pair. Ava remained calm, but her slightly furrowed brows hinted at her confusion. As she walked toward the back of the plane, she could feel the curious gazes of the first-class passengers following her. Miranda stopped and began speaking in a cold tone. "Miss Carter, I'm going to have to ask you to move to another seat. It seems there's been an error with your reservation." Ava tilted her head slightly, raising her eyebrows in surprise. "An error? I don't think so. I purchased this ticket weeks ago, and my reservation was confirmed. Could you please double-check?" Miranda's voice grew firmer. "I've already checked. This seat is not suitable for you. You'll need to sit in the main cabin." The words hung in the air. For the first time, Ava's expression shifted. Disbelief and a flicker of anger crossed her face, but she quickly composed herself. Taking a deep breath, she spoke calmly. "I don't understand. My ticket is valid. Why do I need to move?" Miranda's expression hardened further, her voice lowering but becoming even more menacing. "I don't have time to explain. Either you move, or I'll call security." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, but she gave a quick nod. Quietly, she gathered her bag and rose from her seat. Everyone in the cabin was watching. Whispered conversations rose, and all eyes were on Ava. She held her head high, though no one noticed how tightly she gripped the handle of her laptop bag. When they reached the main cabin, Miranda gestured toward an empty middle seat. Ava placed her bag under the seat without a word and sat down. As Miranda walked away, Ava stared out the window, her face calm, but her thoughts clearly turbulent. Frustration and anger swirled within her as she pulled out her phone and began typing a message. A faint smile appeared on her face as she hit send. As Ava sat in her new seat, the passengers around her shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at her with empathy, while others chose to ignore the situation entirely. But Ava paid them no mind, focusing on her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen before she made a brief phone call. Her voice was low but resolute. "Hello, it's me. We need to act quickly. I'm on the plane. No need to overreact for now, but wait for my signal." She ended the call swiftly and tucked her phone back into her bag. Ava's calm demeanor was almost unnerving, as if she knew exactly how things would unfold. Back in first class, Miranda carried out her duties with a sense of satisfaction. She moved between passengers, checking their drinks with a smile on her face. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to Ava. Something about Ava's composure unsettled Miranda. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, another flight attendant, Clara, approached Ava. Clara, young and empathetic, carried a glass of water in her hand. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Clara asked softly. Ava looked up and smiled warmly. "Thank you, I'm fine. Just a small mix-up, I guess." Clara hesitated, sensing there was more to the situation, but Ava's calmness discouraged further questions. "If you need anything, please let me know," Clara said, placing the water on Ava's tray table. "Thank you," Ava replied with a nod, her tone as composed as ever. As Clara walked away, Ava glanced out the window again, her expression unreadable, but her resolve unmistakable. Something was brewing, and only Ava knew what was about to happen. Ava thanked Clara, genuinely appreciating her kind demeanor. Meanwhile, Miranda remained unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As she continued performing her duties in first class, a gnawing sense of unease grew within her. Ava's calm and self-assured presence unsettled her, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. She believed she had control over the situation, but was oblivious to the larger events unfolding in the background. Back in the main cabin, Ava quietly picked up her phone and typed another message. The message was brief and direct. "Be ready. They'll call soon." She sent it and slipped her phone back into her bag, her composed expression never faltering. In first class, Miranda carried out her tasks mechanically. Suddenly, the flight phone rang. She picked it up, noticing her fingers trembling slightly. "Hello, this is Miranda," she said, trying to maintain a calm tone. The voice on the other end was steady and authoritative. "This is the airline's management office. We've received a complaint regarding one of the first-class passengers. Please ensure all passengers are treated respectfully for the remainder of the flight, and refrain from making further seating adjustments. We expect a detailed report upon arrival." Miranda's face paled. "Of course," she stammered. "I'll make sure everything is handled properly." As she hung up, the tray of drinks in her hand shook slightly. Dennis, an experienced flight attendant, approached her with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Yes, everything's fine," Miranda replied, nodding quickly. But the tension in her voice didn't escape Dennis's notice. Before walking away, Dennis gave her a knowing look. "First-class passengers don't take kindly to being crossed, Miranda. These kinds of people tend to have connections. I hope you haven't upset the wrong person." Miranda didn't want to dwell on Dennis's words, but the growing unease within her was now undeniable. Who was Ava Carter, and why was she so calmly watching events unfold? In the main cabin, Ava took a sip of water, gazing out of the window before pulling out her notebook. She scribbled a short note. "Move when the time is right." After writing it, she closed the notebook and slipped it back into her bag. Meanwhile, Miranda's unease continued to mount. As she carried coffee cups to passengers, she noticed her hands trembling. The other flight attendants were aware of her nervousness, but chose not to comment. When Miranda glanced toward the main cabin, her eyes met Ava's. Ava's gaze was steady, devoid of anger or disdain, but instead carried a calm, unshakable confidence. This only deepened Miranda's unease. As the flight prepared for landing, the captain's voice came over the intercom, instructing passengers to fasten their seatbelts and get ready for descent. While others adjusted their seats and gathered their belongings, Ava remained perfectly still, exuding an air of tranquility. When the plane touched down, Ava waited patiently for the other passengers to disembark. As they filed out toward the terminal, she finally stood, her movements unhurried. Miranda, stationed at the door to bid farewell to passengers, braced herself as Ava approached. "Miss Carter, thank you for flying with us," Miranda said, her voice trembling slightly. Ava gave a neutral nod, her expression unreadable. "You do realize this is just the beginning, don't you?" she said, in a calm yet resolute tone. The color drained from Miranda's face. Ava's words lingered in the air as she stepped off the plane, leaving Miranda rooted in place, consumed by a growing sense of dread. Ava walked off the plane with steady steps, never looking back. As she stepped into the terminal, she knew the actions she had taken against the airline were about to bear fruit. A few passengers cast curious glances, intrigued by what had unfolded, but Ava paid them no mind. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. "We've landed. Be ready." After sending it, she adjusted her bag and headed toward the baggage claim area. Meanwhile, events on the plane were taking a different turn for Miranda. She hadn't anticipated that the consequences of her actions would catch up with her so quickly. After the last passenger disembarked, 2 security officers boarded the plane and walked straight toward her. "Are you Miranda Scott?" one of them asked. Miranda's heart began to race. "Yes, that's me," she replied, her voice trembling. "We need you to come with us. We're investigating an incident related to this flight," one of the officers said. Miranda's face went pale. She tried to say more, but the officers were already escorting her off the plane. The remaining flight attendants watched in stunned silence. Dennis, observing the scene, simply shook his head, his expression a mix of disbelief and mild disappointment. In the terminal, Ava collected her luggage and blended into the crowd. A sleek black sedan pulled up beside her, and the driver stepped out to open the door with a respectful nod. "Everything has been arranged as per your instructions, Miss Carter," the driver said. Ava gave a slight nod of acknowledgement and got into the car. She pulled out her phone and skimmed through a few emails. One from the airline's management caught her attention. The email acknowledged the airline's mistake and detailed the steps being taken to rectify it, including a comprehensive review and mandatory bias and sensitivity training for all staff. After reading carefully, Ava drafted a brief response. "This is a step in the right direction. Please keep me updated on the progress." As the car moved through the city, Ava reflected on the outcomes of her actions. This wasn't just a personal matter for her anymore. Her goal was to drive systematic change and ensure that such incidents wouldn't happen again. Meanwhile, Miranda was seated in an airport interrogation room facing the security officers. Sitting at a small table, she tried to explain herself, but her words were increasingly hollow. "I was just doing my job," Miranda said, her voice faltering. "I thought I was following procedure." One of the security officers gave her a stern look. "Were you aware that Miss Carter had a valid first-class ticket?" he asked. Miranda swallowed hard. "I saw her ticket, but I thought there was an error." "Did you have any evidence to support that assumption?" the other officer asked. Miranda remained silent, unwilling to admit that she had acted on nothing but her own biases. Finally, she said quietly, "No, I didn't." The officer shook his head. Do you understand the gravity of your actions? The company is taking this matter very seriously. Miss Carter is connected to the airline's board of directors, and behavior like this is unacceptable." Miranda's face turned ghostly white. In that moment, she fully realized who Ava Carter was and just how powerful she truly was. Back in Ava's car, her phone buzzed with another notification. It was a message from the airline's board confirming that Miranda had been indefinitely suspended from her duties. Ava read the message without any sign of triumph on her face. To her, this wasn't a victory, but a lesson. She muttered quietly to herself, "This is only the beginning." Miranda dragged her steps as she walked out of the interrogation room toward the airport staff exit. Her head hung low, and her uniform, once a source of pride representing her career, now served as a painful reminder of its end. Reaching her car, she leaned against the steering wheel, taking a deep breath. Her vacant eyes stared ahead as Ava's face flashed in her mind. Ava had controlled every moment of the flight with a calm authority. Miranda had underestimated her because of her biases, and now she was paying the price. At the same time, Ava arrived at her office building. The driver opened the car door, and Ava stepped out gracefully. Inside, her assistant Maya greeted her warmly. "Everything is here," Maya said, handing Ava a folder. The summary of the board meeting, proposed changes for staff training, and the incident reports. They're moving quickly. Ava took the folder and reviewed the documents carefully. "They know this can't be swept under the rug," she said in a calm voice. "They're protecting their interests, but it's a step in the right direction." Maya looked at Ava with admiration. "They wouldn't have acted so quickly without you. You've truly led a significant change." Ava offered a faint smile but remained silent. For her, this wasn't just about a personal victory. It was about addressing the flaws in a system that allowed such incidents to occur. Change had to go deeper than one individual's mistake. Meanwhile, Miranda sat at home, reading an official email from the airline. It stated that her employment had been terminated due to unprofessional conduct and discriminatory behavior toward passengers. Her hands trembled as she held the letter. The career she had once been so proud of was now gone. While she wanted to defend herself, she realized she had no valid argument. She had to face the truth. Her actions were driven by prejudice, leading to irreversible consequences. When Miranda saw Ava appear on a televised interview, her emotions spiraled further. Ava spoke about the airline incident, emphasizing the importance of systemic change. Her calmness and resolve left a profound impact on Miranda. Instead of clinging to her defenses, Miranda decided to learn from this experience. She opened her laptop and began typing an email. In the email, addressed to Ava and the airline, she wrote, "Miss Carter, I sincerely apologize for the discomfort I caused you and other passengers. My actions were unacceptable. I made poor decisions that day and allowed my biases to take control. This incident has forced me to confront the need for change within myself. Your justified stance and determination have initiated a transformation that will impact not only me, but the entire industry. I am committed to learning and improving as part of this change." After sending the email, Miranda felt a small sense of relief. For her, this apology was a step forward, not just for Ava, but for herself. When Ava received the email, she read it carefully. There was an earnest tone in Miranda's words. It didn't feel like a mere attempt to salvage her reputation. It conveyed genuine regret and a willingness to learn. Ava typed a brief response, "Your apology is accepted. Accountability is the first step to growth. I hope this experience will inspire you to set an example for change." After sending the email, Ava gazed out of her office window. This incident had transcended one person's actions. It had created an opportunity to lead systemic transformation. Weeks later, the airline implemented sensitivity and bias training for its staff. These changes were swiftly enacted thanks to Ava's determination and leadership. Other airlines took note of the developments and began reviewing their own policies. While Ava received consultancy offers from various airlines, she chose to stay focused on this process. For her, it wasn't about individual triumphs, but creating a ripple effect of systemic change. One day, Ava boarded another flight for a business trip. At check-in, she noticed how attentive and polite the staff were toward passengers. As she entered the cabin, the crew's heightened professionalism and care were evident. She reflected on how even small changes could make a significant impact. During the flight, Ava spotted Clara. Now a senior attendant, Clara was leading the first-class cabin with confidence. Their eyes met briefly. Clara smiled warmly, and Ava gave a slight nod, acknowledging the kindness with quiet gratitude. As Ava gazed out the window, she pulled out a notebook and wrote, "Change begins with accountability, but grows through consistency." She closed the notebook and leaned back in her seat, a peaceful expression on her face. The story wasn't over yet. There was still much to be done. But Ava knew this wave of change was just the beginning. Miranda, meanwhile, trudged toward the airport staff exit. Her steps were heavy, her head hung low. The uniform that had once symbolized her pride now felt like a burden, a reminder of her mistakes and her career's abrupt end. When she reached her car, she leaned against the steering wheel, taking a deep breath. Staring blankly ahead, she couldn't shake the image of Ava's face from her mind. "My own biases brought me here," she thought. At the same time, Ava stepped gracefully out of the sleek black sedan and headed toward the office building. Her assistant, Maya, greeted her warmly at the door. "Everything is ready," Maya said, handing Ava a folder. "The summary of the board meeting, proposed changes for staff training, and the incident reports. They moved fast." Ava skimmed through the documents, her brow lifting slightly. "It's good to see they're not trying to cover this up," she said calmly. "But this is only the beginning." Maya looked at Ava with admiration. "They wouldn't have acted so quickly without you," she said. "You've spearheaded a significant change." Ava offered a faint smile, but said nothing. To her, this was not about personal victory, but about taking a step toward a fairer, more accountable system. Meanwhile, Miranda sat at home, reading an official email from the airline. The email stated that her employment had been terminated due to unprofessional conduct and biased behavior toward passengers. Her hands trembled as she held the letter. Just days ago, she had been proud of her career. Now, everything was gone. She had to face the truth. "I must learn to live with the consequences of my actions." Miranda's despair deepened when she saw Ava appear in a televised interview. Ava spoke about the incident, highlighting the dangers of systemic biases and the importance of change. Her calmness and resolve left a profound impact on Miranda. At that moment, Miranda decided to stop defending herself and commit to learning from this experience. She opened her laptop and began writing an email. In her message, she wrote, "Miss Carter, I sincerely apologize for the discomfort I caused you and the other passengers. The poor decisions I made that day were the result of allowing my biases to take control. This incident has forced me to confront my need for growth and change. Your justified stance has not only impacted me, but has also initiated a transformation within our industry. I am committed to learning and becoming a better person." After sending the email, Miranda felt a slight sense of relief. For her, this was not the end, but the start of a new beginning. When Ava received the email, she read it carefully. There was sincerity in Miranda's words. This wasn't an attempt to salvage her reputation, but a genuine expression of regret and a desire to learn. Ava drafted a brief response. "Your apology is accepted. Accountability is the first step to growth. I hope this experience serves as a genuine turning point for you." After sending the reply, Ava paused for a moment, gazing out of her office window. This incident had created an opportunity to lead a broader transformation beyond just one person's mistake. Weeks later, the airline implemented sensitivity and bias training programs. Ava's leadership resonated not only within her company, but across the aviation industry, prompting other airlines to reevaluate their policies. The ripple effects of these changes laid the foundation for a more equitable sector. On a business trip, Ava boarded a plane once again. At check-in, she noticed the staff's attentiveness and courtesy toward passengers. Once inside the cabin, she saw the crew exhibiting greater care and professionalism. Reflecting on the impact of small but meaningful changes, Ava felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. During the flight, Ava recognized Clara, who was now a senior attendant leading the first-class cabin. Their eyes met briefly. Clara smiled warmly, and Ava gave a slight nod, acknowledging her kindness with quiet grace. During the flight, Ava noticed Clara. Clara, now a senior attendant, was confidently leading the first-class cabin. Their eyes met briefly, and Clara offered a gentle smile. Ava acknowledged the gesture with a slight nod. As she turned her gaze to the window, Ava pulled out her notebook and wrote, "Change begins with accountability but grows through consistency." Closing the notebook, she leaned back into her seat with a sense of peace. The story wasn't over yet. There was still much to be done, but Ava knew this wave of change was a powerful beginning.